What's up, everybody? It's Quinton from Hunters of Light. We're busy struggling through seemingly insurmountable technical difficulties, but we've managed to get Anne's images on the screen, and we're not fiddling with any more dials or pulling any wires or connecting them, because we can actually go from first to second to third. So at this point in time, we're good to go. So I want to welcome Anne to the channel today. She is going to be talking about sports photography. Now, Anne has been a staff photographer, chief photographer, picture editor for Cape Times, as well as, I think it was, what was the other one? Pretoria?
Sports Day.
Sports Day.
Yeah.
She's also covered international sports events like the ICC Cricket World Cup, FIFA Soccer World Cup, Rugby World Cup, and the Summer Olympics in Brazil in 2016. So as far as sports goes, she certainly has got a fantastic pedigree. So yeah, I think Anne, let's head over to you. Have you kind of taken a couple of seconds to calm and relax, and you're ready to go now?
Yeah, sorry about that. I freaked out a little bit because we just couldn't connect properly.
But yeah, it's not a problem.
Welcome, everybody. Yeah, I'm going to blast you with lots of pictures. I threw out 100, but I've still got a lot. So yeah, I'm starting off with showing a picture of a Novaflex. Now, only the older photographers are going to even know what a Novaflex is. It was actually an extraordinary piece of equipment, given that it was basically metal with a small element. It actually gave you incredibly sharp pictures. And if you look at it, you can see that the whole focusing mechanism is actually a pistol grip. Okay, so the first time I got to shoot a rugby test out of Cape Town, I said to the Cape Times, I'll drive to PE, I've got family in PE, shoot the game, drive back the next day. And what had happened was the week before I'd had eye surgery because I had got a hockey injury. So anyway, what happened 20 minutes into the game, Hempies du Toit, who was like a seriously big oak, he went to charge the English scrum half into touch, dropped his shoulder to charge him into touch, and he missed him and hit me. So I did a spectacular maneuver in the air, and my finger actually got caught up in the whole mechanism, and I actually broke my finger. So the medics kind of packed my open eye with ice so I could carry on shooting. So I carried on shooting the game. But when I was leaving the ground, this is the point of the whole story, these two youngsters looked at me, looked at each other, and the one turned to the other guy and he said, "Hey, dis die tannie wat sy gat gesien het teen hempies." And I was never allowed to forget that. I mean, for years after that, when I did a Western Province practice, Nick Mallet would peck me on the shoulder and say, "Watch out, here comes hempies." So yeah, anyway.
That's the fantastic thing about the people that we've had on the Hunters of Light, is that there's an amazing amount of behind the scenes that happens. And I mean, I'm
Sure.
loving hearing all of these things. It's absolutely fantastic.
So yeah, as I say, most people wouldn't have never even have seen a Novaflex. I was going to buy a new second-hand car, but then a Rebel West Indies cricket team was coming out. So I forgot about the car and I bought the Novaflex. But as I say, considering what it consisted of, it actually gave you very sharp pictures, although it was a 5.6. But okay, let's move on to some real pictures. Okay, I was lucky enough to be one of 3 South African photographers that actually shot 1995 World Cup and 2007 World Cup final. The interesting thing about this picture was I decided not to shoot flash. So although I was shooting with a 200mm lens, which, you know, the rule of thumb is whatever your focal length is, your speed must be higher. So ideally, even for a static subject, I should have been shooting at 2/50th of a second. But there was no way I was going to shoot flash. So I thought, no, that's it. I'm going to shoot at a 60th. Okay. Plus, this was the lap of honor. And there was no way with my lack of height, I could actually get a decent picture, because there were about 30 policemen in front of everybody. So I wormed my way through the policemen, okay, and I got 2 frames. And then a cop who was bigger than any of the Springboks, including Kobus Visser, grabbed me and he said, "Hi!" And he chucked me out of the little area I was, you know. So, obviously there was celebration in the streets and stuff, and our plane was delayed. I mean, I eventually got back to Cape Town, must have been like 2 o'clock in the morning. And from the airport, I drove to the Cape Times offices, because obviously they had night staff, so I could get into the building, and I processed because I wanted to see if and literally, as I said, I only got 2 frames. The one was a complete disaster, total camera shake, and then this one, which was fine. So that was pretty lucky. Okay, likewise, obviously didn't get a roving bib. So what I did was I turned over one of the rubbish bins and stood on that and shot this picture, which has been published about 50 times. Okay, the interesting thing there was, in those days, the TV picture changed every 25th of a second. So you literally had to shoot at a 15th to get that. And a couple of the guys saw me do it, and they did the same thing. But I saw, not all of them, but I saw some of them their pictures subsequently, and they had the black lines because I didn't remember to shoot it at 15 to the second. It's no longer applicable in terms of the newer TVs, but the older ones, that was the situation. So yeah, it's a matter of, you know, trying to be a bit creative when you're faced with not having an option of getting anywhere near the actual presentation. Yeah.
So Anne, how tall are you?
5'2" and a bit.
So that's about 6 foot.
1.6.
6 foot with a bin. Eh? 6 foot with a bin.
Yeah, with a big bin. With a big bin.
Great.
Okay, this is obviously moving straight on to 2007, John Smith with the trophy. And then here, there are no prizes for guessing who was at the 1995 World Cup, as opposed to in Brighton in 2015, when we lost to Japan in the biggest upset in world rugby history, you know. And what happens at the World Cup is you get a static position behind whichever side you choose. And obviously we chose to be where the Springboks were scoring. Okay, and then at halftime, I sort of thought, well, no, these Japs have got to get tired. There's no way they can win this game. So we stayed where the Springboks were scoring. So obviously, none of the South African photographers actually got the Japanese winning try, but they also did a lap of honor. So, you know, could at least get some pictures. But yeah, that was obviously such a massive upset. I think this Springbok fan must have been on suicide watch for at least a week after that game. Okay, this is also Rugby 2015 World Cup, France against Romania. Because what I did was, obviously I had clients for the South African games and for one or two of the other teams. But if I didn't actually have a client, it didn't matter. I still booked to go and shoot those games because, I mean, it's a Rugby World Cup. You must maximize your opportunities. And the French guy in the blue is actually scoring a try here. It's just one of my more unusual rugby shots. Yeah,
it's the inverted try scoring maneuver.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, Andre Pollard scoring a try against the All Blacks. Interesting thing about this picture is the very first time Etienne Rothbard, retired photographer on the Star, begged me for years to enter the SAB Sports Photographer Awards. Eventually in 2011, he convinced me to do it again. And truthfully, I chucked this picture out of my portfolio and at the last minute brought it back, and it actually, the judges decided it was actually the action picture of the competition. And as I say, I nearly didn't enter it. I did at least win Photographer of the Year as well. But what was quite funny there was E.T. and I went to the dinner and we passed these hideous trophies, and I said, oh, shame, people are going to take that hideous stuff home. Didn't think I was going to be one of them, but at least it came with a 20,000 Rand check, so it wasn't too bad to take that hideous trophy. Okay, this is just, again, a bit of an unusual one during a training session. What happened, which was prior to the Springboks going overseas, and they watered the Loftus pitch to practice in the mud, but it's still made for a nice pic, you know. And then John Smith. Yeah, the big thing with sport is there are a lot of on-the-field pictures that you can get as well that aren't necessarily action, that still work really nicely. And yeah, in the ideal world, I wouldn't have had that big white in the background, but you know, on principle, I don't crop anything. I don't manipulate anything like that. Yeah, all I do is I do a bit of cropping and I do some tweaking. That's it. Significance of this, it's just another diving try picture. I mean, I could have shown you hundreds of those, but this one is Bowden Barrett in the 2015 Rugby World Cup final. So obviously for your on-day client, it becomes a very significant picture.
I love that, with the sort of eyes, you know, almost looking right into your lens there, hey?
Yeah, it was actually, he literally couldn't have dived more perfectly into my lens. Yeah.
So John Lincourt says, you're getting some great shots right in the action. What lens are you using?
Okay, these days, 99% of the time I shoot with the 200-400. Best thing I ever did was buy that 200-400. The funny thing is there that I was lucky. I was one of the photographers that Nikon approached to hand in all their Canons, and they gave me like 350 grams with Nikon gear. At that stage, the Nikon processors were actually better than Canon. I'm not going to get into a debate about now, but certainly then it was the case. And so I said to Pitt, I said, you know, I know I got all this equipment from Nikon, but I'm buying this 200-400. And he said, are you going to sell more pictures, make more money, about 10 questions? And all, no. So I said, so why are you spending 60K on a lens you don't absolutely need? And I looked at him and I said, because I want to and I can. But truthfully, it was the best thing I ever did, because I mean, a lot of the times now I'll actually just shoot with one body. And truthfully, I actually waited for the new version to come out, because I would have loved it during the Soccer World Cup, because there were games at the Soccer World Cup where you were so tight, you actually couldn't lift a second body.
Yeah.
You literally could not lift a second body. So I would have loved that 200, 400 for then. Before I was shooting with a 500, which was, it's a lovely lens, but it's just quite limiting in terms of, as soon as they came over the 25, then I'd have to lift my my 70 to 200.
And then
So
you lose a bit of action there as well, and potential shots.
Yeah, the biggest thing was that, you know, with this lens is that I just keep zooming back, and you can still shoot really tight, nice diving try pictures where you're still at 300 as opposed to being on at 200.
Yeah,
you know, or even 350.
Is that the Canon 200, 400 or Nikon?
No, Nikon.
Okay, all right.
Okay, but I must also say that I shoot now. The last couple of years, I've shot with the D500. So, because of the crop factor in the sensor, in effect, it becomes a 300, 600, which is absolutely perfect. You know. Okay, just another unusual rugby picture. It's quite weird because that's actually JP Peterson, the wing, and the All Blacks hooker. So how that happened, it wasn't from a line out. I don't know quite how it happened, but it happened. You know.
Yeah, they obviously got names on each other's dance cards and decided to go for it.
Yeah, this is a very premeditated picture because when I got to the ground, I saw the backlighting and I saw the dry grass. And I actually said to one of the photographers, this is the picture that I want to get. So I actually positioned myself specifically for this, and it took at least 60 minutes into the game before I actually got what I wanted. You know,
it's very cool. I love how the lights sort of reflecting off the grass is lighting up her face and all that, making it really, really nice. Good job.
Sometimes you try and premeditate stuff and it doesn't happen anyway. I mean, I'm thinking more wildlife, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I've sat waiting for elephant to come back and drink for 8 hours, and they never came back. You know? So at least with sport, you've got a bit more control.
Exactly.
Okay, this is Siya Kolisi's first try for the Springboks. The weird color is basically what happens is when they score a try, a flame thrower lights up. So that's why it looks a bit weird. And again, I don't do masking and what on my sports pictures. You basically ethically shouldn't make much in the way of changes other than a cropping, and obviously just tweaking, but nothing in terms of manipulation. Okay, one of the best players in the world and one of the toughest and one of the nicest, Richie McCaw, All Black captain. Okay, this one I'm going to have to spend a little bit of time on. This was if you follow rugby, the guys will know, the infamous Piet van Zyl incident 2002, a rugby Tri-Nations test as it was then in Durban. It was the first test I was ever shooting on my digital camera, which, by the way, 4 megapixels in 2002 cost me 80,000 Rand. 1 gig card, hope you're all sitting down, cost me 5,000 Rand.
Yep.
Okay. It was 13 to the dollar. It later went down to 6, and then Zuma came in, and of course we know where it is now.
Yeah.
But I was so excited when I only paid 4,000 Rand for the second one. Yeah. 1 gig, you know. Anyway, so what happened here now, there's a cliche in sports photography that action is for show and stock is for dough. So I shoot obviously I shoot a lot of stock as well. So I was lucky in that I was on the referee, and the next thing I just saw this come in and I just let rip. I mean, that camera was like 2.5 frames per second. And it literally was within not even two seconds that they were actually on the ground. Now, I was very lucky because out of 35, maybe 40 photographers, I was the only one who got the entire incident, okay? In fact, a very experienced rugby photographer who was next to me, and I'm going to say it like he said it, turned to me and said, "What the fuck happened?" And because all he saw was the guy being carted off by the security, you know, and the ref in a golf cart. And I just said to him, "But you don't want to know." Anyway, this was my most lucrative sequence of pictures ever. The advantage there was obviously because I was shooting digital, I actually gave the card to the Sunday Times photographer and carried on shooting. Now, photographers these days, and I'm not being nasty, but they don't know what pressure is. Okay, pressure is when you've got to shoot the Australian cricket team for 15 minutes into the ladies' toilet, hand process, hairdryer, send your pictures. That's pressure. Shooting on digital is a piece of pie by comparison. Okay?
Yeah, I can imagine.
Anyway, so, I mean, everybody wanted this picture. In the end, I mean, just on that day, I sold to obviously all the agencies, AFP, Reuters, you name it. Rugby World used it, Hazelnet used it, SABC used it. I made nearly 30,000 Rand just on that day, basically. And then since then, I've probably sold another, I've got just on 40,000 Rand out of the sequence because I was the only one who got it. I mean, I was lucky, but I got it. You know?
I mean, I think that's the thing with when you're shooting sports events, you can't really take the camera away from your eye for any length of time because you know, you're going to be missing something, and a sequence like this where, you know, there's the opportunity to get the whole thing, you know, and all the other guys missed it. I mean, that's just fantastic.
Yeah, no, as I say, it was lucky, but I made the most of my luck, you know. I think 2 of the other guys got them on the ground, but nobody else had the whole sequence. So as I say, I was lucky, but it worked out nicely. Okay, now this was obviously the highlight of my sports photography career, was covering the Olympics in Brazil in 2016. Obviously, this is the opening ceremony. What happens is at least 2,500 photographers are accredited, but only a couple of hundred actually get to the opening ceremony. I think probably Rio was a little bit less spectacular than some of the others, but still, just being there is awesome. I mean, even now, I mean, it's, you know, so many years ago, I'm getting goose flesh while I'm talking about it, you know.
Yeah, it's things like that you know, you'll remember for many years, and regale stories to your grandkids about, you know, that
I know,
kind of thing.
it was amazing. I mean, it was incredibly hard work because, you know, when the swimming started, it only started at 10 o'clock at night because of the American TV audience. So by the time you'd sent to clients, and then, you know, I had to take a BRT back to where I was staying, which was another hour. I mean, I was getting back 2 o'clock in the morning and then leaving again at 6. So yeah, it was incredibly hard work. And I was home for 2 days and then went to Luanda to shoot basketball. And I actually got very sick, and I panicked that I might have Zika because of, obviously there was the Zika scare, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, people said to me beforehand, they said to me, oh, you know, what about Zika? What about Zika? I said, well, what about Zika? I mean, you know, I shot in the townships in Cape Town. I had a tracer bullet come within a foot of me. I'm not worried about a mozzie.
I love it.
Anyway, this is an interesting picture because this is Chad Leclerc. In this event, he 3 times looked to see where Michael Phelps was. And the irony was that Michael Phelps, Chad Leclerc, and another guy whose name I've forgotten and probably couldn't pronounce anyway, they all were dead heat for the silver medal. So my point is, if Chad hadn't actually been looking to see where Michael Phelps was, he might well have won the silver outright. Obviously, Michael Phelps. Okay, this is obviously into the gymnastics. I didn't have a client for this event, but I absolutely love shooting gymnastics and very seldom get the opportunity. So that's what I did in Rio. You know, I'd shoot for whoever I needed to shoot, and then I went to any other event that I thought would make for great pictures. Basically, what happened is that you could choose any position. You know, like for instance, at gymnastics, there were probably 5 different positions in the arena for the brown photographers. The top agency, they were the greenies. They were wearing the green jackets, and they were allowed kind of anywhere. And particularly at the athletics, it was so irritating because they just got in our way all the time. And like I'll go on later, I'll show Wade Finucane breaking the world record for the 400 meters. And I mean, one of the green photographers stood in front of, from where we were positioned, stood in front of the actual board that showed the time. He stood there the entire time and actually spoiled everybody's thought picture from where we were. You know, but you know, Getty, for instance, had 120 photographers at the Olympics. I mean, it's just mind blowing.
Yeah, it's
but okay, I must probably speed up a little bit.
But it's fine. I've actually got a question, or 2.
Okay.
Dion wants to know, how does one get into sports media? He knows that it's Supersport Park. They don't allow spectators to take telephoto lenses in. So I suppose it's more a question of how do you start and build up a portfolio if you can't take bigger lenses into the actual events?
Yeah, it is a bit of a catch-22. The irony of that was it was actually what we call a weekend warrior. In other words, not a full-time photographer who generally they give their pictures away, so they manage to get accredited, give it to agencies, etc. He actually complained about the people in the stadium, which I thought was quite ironic, seeing he wasn't even a full-time photographer.
Okay.
Because previously they allowed photographers, you know, non-professional photographers. I won't call them amateurs because a lot of them are really, really good, but they're non-professional. Okay. They used to allow them in. So yeah, really, you've got to. I mean, obviously I started my career at a newspaper, so that gave me a direct in.
Right.
It's a difficult scenario because, you know, obviously depending on the sport, they're more strict than others. I mean, I had an extraordinary situation at a swimming gala. I was actually just shooting for a friend whose son was doing his last gala. And I'd been there like 2 hours. And the next thing, this woman stood in front of me and said, "Where's your accreditation?" And I said, "Sorry, it was like an inter-club thing. I really didn't know I had to be accredited."
Yeah.
Kind of long story short, she insisted that I actually go to the police station with her.
Wow.
which was across the road. And I did it because I knew I was going to make a complete idiot out of her.
Yeah.
Which I did. I actually did a law degree before I decided to become a photographer. So it was actually quite easy to just tie her up in knots and make her look like a complete idiot. And the police just said, look, you know, you've actually got no grounds whatsoever. But yeah, that was a bit extraordinary. But yeah, accreditation is really difficult. Probably the best is to actually try and go in through the union, show them some of your pictures and offer maybe to shoot 1 or 2 games for them for free to get a foot in the door.
Yeah,
That's
and I think also, you know, if you have got a local sports club near you, or your kid's school or something like that, you know, I mean, if you've got fantastic pictures, you know, theoretically they will transfer from amateur, sports clubs to professional. You know, if you're getting the shots, the emotion, the you know, and everything is you know, and the work is good, then you've got a portfolio that you can take in and say, listen, well, let me, give me a chance.
I'm actually going to show later on. I'm going to show a couple of pictures of Billikies rugby, and
yes.
you know, really, nobody's going to stop you going to schools games, and you can shoot that with pretty basic equipment. And in fact, I'm going to show you a picture that I shot with Nikon D80 and the Sigma 75-300. So yeah, there's nothing stopping you shooting sports stuff at schools where you can get closer access. Okay, this is just an arty-farty one from the fencing. It was the first time ever that I shot fencing, and it's an amazing sport to shoot. It's lovely.
I love that.
Yeah, when Pitt saw this picture, he said, "No, are you sure you didn't get Zika?" But yeah, this wasn't just shooting slow speed. I shot this at 1/5 of a second, but I actually moved the camera left to right at the same time as well.
Oh, it's lovely.
So it was just to over-exaggerate. Okay, now I'm going to just speed up a little bit. That's from the sevens. Okay, this is also Chad Leclerc, but now in the freestyle event, certainly if it's 50 or 100 meters, they barely breathe. You're lucky if they breathe once a length. But anyway, he got a silver medal here. And if anybody has ever heard his father, he's got a very distinctive voice. And I heard this, "Go Chatty, go Chatty." And I knew it was him. So I was the only one who actually took a picture of his family, because obviously I'd heard that ridiculous voice that he's got. Okay, this is quite interesting, because this is at the finish line of the athletics. They have got this tiered box for photographers. It takes a couple of 100 photographers. Now, for Usain Bolt, obviously 100 meters, and as it happened, Wade van Niekerk ran the 400 the same night. I actually got there 5.5 hours before the event, and I was standing in the 3rd row, and I suddenly thought, whoa, if a tall Russian comes in front of me, because that actually happened at the gymnastics. I'd been waiting 2 hours right in the front, and there was a coach immediately in front of me. So I stood about 1/2 meter back from the actual barrier, if you like. And next thing, this Russian comes and stands in front of me. He was, honestly, I mean, I know I'm short and probably exaggerating, but he looked like 7 foot. So I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, "No!" Okay, and he like looked at me, and everybody else started shouting at him and that. And I thought, well, even if he's Russian, I could always use a word that starts with an F and he'd understand that. But he did move off, you know. But here I thought, wow, what happens if a big Russian comes in front of me like 2 minutes before the race or something, you know? So what happened was an Australian photographer man who was actually shorter than me. There were at least 50 cameras set up remotely on the track, and then there were probably about 35 on the railing of the front row. So we spoke to the photo manager, and he said, "Oh, come on, you can come into the corner." So we were right in the front row for Usain Bolt and for Wade van Niekerk, which was amazing.
Nice. You didn't even need to take your big bin with you.
No, or even use the F word. Okay, obviously, I mean, I was hugely privileged to be at the last Olympics for Usain Bolt. Well, a privilege to be there anyway, much as the last Olympics for Usain Bolt and for Michael Phelps. Okay, obviously, Wade got the 400 meters title, broke the world record that had been standing for over 20 years. And unfortunately, a couple of years ago, made this silly, you know, hindsight's an exact science, no rewind buttons in life. But he was originally, they said, will he be a touch judge? Touch judge, yeah, at a friendly charity rugby game that was a curtain raiser to a game at Newlands. And he said, no, he wants to actually play. And of course he played. and messed up his knee, and it hasn't. I mean, that's cost him hundreds of millions of dollars. You know, he got the best surgeon in the world, but you know, at that level, you're talking hundreds of a second. And I just hope I'm wrong, but I doubt he's ever going to be at that level again, just because of that injury. Okay. Yeah, what happens at the athletics is they've got a moat all the way around. So obviously you get a position in the moat that is going to best suit you. Ideally, one wouldn't shoot long jump only from this angle, but from where I was in the moat, shooting them actually jumping, there was a chair in the background that you just couldn't get rid of. So I concentrated on the landing rather, which is actually usually more spectacular anyway.
It obviously wasn't a very deep moat, huh?
No.
For you to be taking pictures standing in there.
No, luckily, yeah, it wasn't too deep. Because when I shoot cricket and they give us chairs, I've got to take like 4 chairs, otherwise I can't see over the road. But this is just quite interesting because before the first ever time ever that I shot diving, and I'd always heard, oh, diving's so difficult and this and that, the next thing. And I thought, hang on, I'm not being arrogant, but it's like clubbing seals, because they're only going to go in one direction. The dive could be a different dive, but I mean, really compared with hockey, soccer, rugby, it's like clubbing seals, you know, because they can only go one way. But it's nice to shoot. And then this always makes for great pictures. I'm just speeding up a little bit. Obviously, I mean, winning is everything. Nobody remembers who came second. That's just the way it is. So, you know, these athletes, some of them could have trained for 8 years because they might have not got a medal in the previous Olympics. And then they win gold. So it's actually awesome to be able to capture that. We see Mo Farah winning the 5,000. He also retained his title in the 10,000 meters. An amazing athlete. I mean, amazing story. Okay, this is just a tiny section of the photographers at the swimming. Because with the swimming, you've actually got to get a specific ticket. So some of the days you literally sat there for 6 hours hoping that one of the agencies or whoever, some of the photographers who had previously been allocated a ticket had decided at the last minute not to actually attend the swimming, and that you would get one of the tickets that was handed back. So sometimes you sat there for 6 hours waiting to actually get a ticket to get you into the swimming. Roger would love this picture. If you look at the Canon completely outnumbering Nikon.
Absolutely.
But overall, I would say on the events that I covered, it was probably closer to 40, 45 to Nikon and 60, 65 to Canon, depending on the event. So this is a little bit skewed. Roger, sorry. Okay, back to South African events. Not shot boxing often. This is probably the one event where your kind of cameras with serious frames per second does help. Because again, it's one of those sports, as so many of them, you can't see the action and then shoot it. You can't wait to see the glove on the jaw and then shoot it. You've got to shoot in advance of that.
Yeah, if you see it, then the shot you're going to get is the one where everything is bounced off and, you know, you've missed the action there.
No, absolutely. And even the frame where the glove was on the jaw, you couldn't see as much of the sweat. So it actually wasn't the best picture. But you know, I'm a strong believer, and sorry if I'm going to offend some people, but I really think only a bad sports photographer needs more than 6 frames a second. Because really, if you're shooting at 14 frames a second and you're later on the shot, like with cricket, you're getting 14 frames a second of the bails on the ground. That's just my take on it.
Absolutely. And you know what, I think it comes down to obviously experience, but also intuition. And if you've done it for long enough, you know when something's going to happen, you know, and I think the same thing applies to wildlife. You know, we've had a couple of guys talking about wildlife, and they know animal behavior, and they know when you know the bird is bouncing its head a little bit, the next thing it's going to do is jump up and whatever. And the same thing applies here. You know something's going to happen because you've been part of it for so long that you can feel that there's something going to happen, and you just aren't ready. No, for sure. And even certain players, you kind of know their tendencies. I'll give you an example. I mean, he actually cost us the series. Sorry, he just now departed, but he was a very selfish player. And he also loved to break on the blind side from a scrum. And in the final test in the 1997 against the British and Irish Lions,
I knew that he was going to try and be a hero and actually try and win the game for us. So I knew exactly where he was going to go. And of course, they caught him. He didn't score, and we lost the series. So, knowing individual players' tendencies also helped.
Absolutely. John wants to know, how much do you use Burst?
If there's something really drastic happening, I will. But I don't believe in the shotgun approach. I mean, starting on film, I think it disciplines you to some degree.
Yeah.
And yeah, I do shoot more pictures now that I'm shooting digital. But unless it's something really dramatic, if a guy's doing a diving try, yes, I will go into a burst option. But, I'll probably shoot too few frames, to be honest, if anything.
I think it also comes down to, what you feel as a photographer. I think film, the guys that came from film will definitely shoot less because, you didn't have the opportunity to shoot as much as, as the current sports cameras now, 20 frames a second. I mean, that's ridiculous.
That is crazy. Yeah.
That's like
that is crazy.
A roll.
I mean, imagine a roll of 36.
Exactly. I was trying to work out how many seconds it would take to pull that roll, but yeah, then it takes you another minute to change that roll, put another one in. But I think it just comes down to the way that you where you've come from and what you feel comfortable with.
I can tell her. Can I tell her?
Yes.
How am I doing on time? Because I want to tell her quite a funny story at Newlands. It had been raining for like 5 days. It can only rain in Cape Town. So it was so muddy, you've got no idea. So what happened about 25 minutes into the game, I take out my first roll of film and the TV guy knocks me and it lands in the mud. And I mean, there was no point trying to even get it out again. And I just said, I actually was quite calm about it. I said, hey, that's the first 25 minutes of the game gone because of you knocking me. And he looked at me and I'm going to use the word. He looked at me and he said, fuck you. Okay. So I waited for the second half, and the only place at the entrance, they had a piece of wood on the mud and they had carpet over it. Okay. So what I did was I waited for him to go past me. I waited for his sound guy with cables to go past me, and then I put my foot on the cables one time. Okay. And he slid for about 2 meters in the mud, on his knees, holding up his camera. And as I walked past him, I just said, fuck you.
So it's competitive there, hey? Wow.
Okay, obviously this is a bit of again premeditated shot, but you have to have the right light for it. This was the perfect light for it, and it worked. As I say, it's totally dependent on the light. You can have the idea, but if the light isn't right, it's just never going to work. Okay, this is very old picture on Neg, Two Oceans Marathon, trying to get something a little bit different. St. James area. IPL, runouts are always really nice for pictures, usually. This is an example of where shooting at night is just so much more dramatic than shooting exactly the same thing during the day. It just wouldn't have the same effect. Again, trying to go for a different angle, and this was before flip screen, so I was a bit of a contortionist to actually get into position to shoot this. Just an unusual picture, particularly seeing as it's A.B. de Villiers. In all the years of shooting cricket, I think I've got 3 shots in total where the guys have actually lost their bats. It doesn't happen often. Goal celebration, which is particularly nice when they run straight towards you. The South Africans aren't like the Brazilian soccer team. If you watch them during World Cup, I think beforehand they knew where all the cameras were, the TV cameras, and they went straight to the TV cameras. It's actually quite funny because, I mean, obviously they're such a brand on their own that they want to keep that brand going, and they literally, you could see they make a beeline for the TV cameras straight off the scoring.
Absolutely.
Bit of a different rugby shot. Yeah. Okay, this is obviously Paralympics. I mean, I've got such respect for these people that I wasn't commissioned to shoot this. I knew the event was happening and I just went and shot some pictures, and one of the magazines actually gave them really nice exposure, so it was actually worth it. We moan when the wind blows, and you look at people like that. Okay, again, a bit of a different cricket picture. Okay, this was quite a fun one. I used Pitt's 25-year-old Nikonos to shoot this. Obviously, rangefinder, you couldn't actually see what you were shooting, so it was a bit of hit and hope. But I mean, I didn't have any kind of snorkel or anything like that. I just held my breath and kind of lay in the water, and the guy swam over me. So it actually worked quite nicely. It was obviously a training session, not a natural gala. You know. Okay, just another rugby one. Okay, this is an interesting shot because what I did was shooting with a D500 with a 1.4, and the crop factor, it effectively gave me a 1,260 mil lens. And I say, if you look at the detail on the shoe, you've just got to take your hat off for that D500, for that sharpness. You know. And then, yeah, sometimes a drop catch can make as interesting a picture as one where they've actually caught the ball. Okay, this was also quite fun because it rained like crazy for an hour and a half before the game at Loftus. And everybody was bitching and moaning about how wet it was and how horrible it was. And I was thinking, duh, you know, how often do you actually get to shoot pictures of this magnitude of rain and water everywhere? So I actually went and positioned myself next to this puddle and just waited for action to happen. Because, I mean, that was the story of the game. It wasn't who scored what try. That was the story of that game. You know?
Absolutely. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about, you know, experience and intuition and you know, feeling where things are going to happen. I love this. I think it's fantastic.
Truthfully, this didn't take experience. This didn't take anything other than having more than 2 brain cells to work with.
Listen, I'm trying to give you more credit here. Just accept it.
No, as I say, I couldn't understand the negativity amongst the photographers before this game. I mean, I was delighted that it was raining, you know, and I was just hoping they weren't going to call it off. You know, that's happened before at a hockey match where they actually called it off, where I could have got the same sort of pictures. You know. Anyway. Okay, again, you know, one's always got to be on the lookout for something a little bit different on the field. Always makes for a nice picture. These guys are complete nutcases, absolute nutcases, but awesome for pictures. I mean, crazy guys, but as I said, beautiful for pictures. Okay, golf's not my favorite sport. What happens is because really, I mean, all the golf pictures look the same except for the bunker shots. Okay. And you'll be on the 10th tee and a guy will be in the bunker on the 11th. You'll be on the 11th, then there'll be somebody on the bunker on the 10th. Plus, you know, when you shoot at Sun City, you walk probably 7 or 8 Ks during the course of the day in like 42 degrees, and you don't get any bunker shots because they're all in where you're not standing.
Yeah,
know?
absolutely.
So I'm not a big golf fan, I have to say. It's just my
also,
personal thing on golf.
You know, if you've got a selection of lenses to, you know, to get some wider stuff and some longer stuff, you know, that couple of kilograms adds up very, very quickly if you're walking in those conditions.
Yeah, the other thing is with golf, you've got to remember that you're not allowed to actually shoot until he's played the shot. So that also limits you hugely, particularly in terms of trying to shoot something a little bit wider. That's why, you know, the guys will use a 400 or 600 and go stand down the fairway to get them actually teeing off, because then you can, you know, they're not going to know that you're shooting if you're far enough away. But if you're close by, you're not allowed to shoot at all until they've actually played the shot.
Yeah.
Okay, this was quite interesting as well. First time I was shooting a steeplechase.
That's very cool. I love that. Wow.
I took a serious cover for my camera. Serious cover. And I must be honest, after this race, I looked like I'd spent 2 hours at the bottom of a swimming pool, but I think it was worth it. My camera was dry, but I was soaked. Oh,
I love that. So just in keeping with your cable TV guy story, Martin Ashworth wants to know, he says, you must have developed great friendships with fellow photographers pitchside. But I think, you know, this is just in opposition to what you said earlier. But he wants to know, who's inspired you during your career at pitchside?
In the early days, I looked up, obviously, guys like Jan Hamman and Wessel Oosthuizen. Jan has obviously left us quite a long time ago now. He ended up with lung cancer. Wessel, I mean, you've got to respect him. I saw him working at the Olympics. I think he was already 75, thereabouts, or 74. And I mean, his work ethic is amazing. You know, for his age, it's unbelievable how he copes with shooting those events. So those were the guys locally that inspired me initially, definitely.
And then Gareth wants to know, what accessories did you use to keep the camera dry? Was it one of the camera raincoats, or did you MacGyver something?
No, I have actually a friend in Cape Town. There's a pensioner who makes rain covers that are absolutely brilliant, because I've shot a soccer match that was called off because the field was waterlogged, but everything stays 100% dry. And it was basically that cover that she'd made for me to use with a 70-200. And I used that cover with lots of elastic bands and things like that to position it perfectly. But it was, as I say, the camera stayed 100% dry. Yeah, you can buy fancy rain covers that don't work as well. And I basically bought, I paid her 10 times what she asked for it, because I knew the kind of work that had gone into it. But it was still a third of the price of buying others that aren't as effective. So, okay, this is very unusual cricket shot. First time I've ever got that, where the guy plays a shot and his back basically breaks in half. It was one of those shots where, to be quite honest, shot it and then quickly looked to see, oh, was I quick enough, or was the remainder of the bat actually out of the frame? So yeah, sometimes you get lucky, stuff like that. Okay, this is quite a funny shot, because this is what they call a muddy princess. It's basically the women's equivalent of the warrior race. Not that women do compete in the warrior race, but there are some that are just for men. And what happened, this rather large lady spotted me, and she sort of, I think she was kind of showing off a bit, and she started sort of running quite fast and lifting her legs in this mud, and the next thing she just fell one time, right in front of me. So that was absolutely perfect.
That's beautiful. I love it. It's so cool.
Again, it's something a bit different, you know what I mean? As I say, I was lucky, because, as I say, I'm sure if she'd just come through normally and hadn't been showing off, she would have actually probably come through without falling.
No, I really like it, because it seems very art directed, because the mud mirrors her hair. It's the same sort of spiky vibe. It's very cool.
Yeah. As I say, it was one of those, if you'd actually set it up for an ad campaign, you probably couldn't have got it better. It was just lucky. Oh, yeah, just also showing, it's a wonder there are not more major injuries in rugby when you see how these guys fall. Okay, now I'm going to tell a funny story, and I'm going to use the F word again, I'm afraid, but I have to, because it's a story. So Yoav, photographer from AFP, Israeli, never seen a cricket match in his life, and he gets sent to shoot a cricket test, not even a T20, a test. Okay, so eventually on about middle of the second day, he turns to everybody and he said, I can't do the accent particularly well, but he says, this game, it's about getting the fucking sticks. So yeah, that's one of my favorite stories relating to cricket. South Africans will love this, because this is David Warner going out. Everybody loves to hate David Warner. Again, a bit of a different shot. Cricket seriously quite a few people have died over the years from cricket balls hitting them on the head. Schoolboys who didn't have helmets. Phil Hughes, the Australian test player, got hit on the back of the head. That's why you'll see now, in fact, you can actually see it on the photograph. You see that little black strip under the helmet. That's what they wear now, because of what happened to Phil Hughes. Yeah, this was also quite lucky. It was a big sporting, big surfing event the same Sunday that we'd gone down to shoot the rugby test on the Saturday, and we were able to shoot from the pier, which makes a huge difference when you're trying to shoot surfing, because it just gets you so much closer and nicer angle.
That's a much nicer angle than from the beach, that's for sure.
Yeah,
so you didn't go and take a cover and jump in the water and get some shots from down there, eh?
No, because there's sharks in that water. I could show 50 pictures of surfing, but I have to obviously limit it a bit. But this is quite an interesting picture, because wheelchair basketball is actually quite an aggressive game.
It's very physical, hey?
Very physical. Aggro, like you can't believe, And here the guys' wheelchairs got intertwined with the other guys, and they have to have assistants who kind of run on and kind of release them.
Yeah, because they're completely strapped into them.
Yes. This is just unusual, because both stumps came out the ground. It's the first time it happened when I was shooting. Basically, I think they've done it for TV, because it just looks so much more spectacular on TV when you've got two stumps coming out the ground. But I'm not complaining. They can do it for every game for my part. Timurlin Kini, the Kaizer Chiefs goalkeeper. think I might be going a little bit fast in terms of showing the pictures. So I'm going to slow down. How am I doing on time? Okay.
Well, we started a little bit later, so I think we probably got probably about 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes.
Okay.
That's fine.
Should be fine.
Yeah.
It should be fine. Yeah, this was a bit of a different picture. David Miller went to run the guy out, and he actually tripped into the stumps and didn't run him out at all. He just broke the stumps with his feet, which obviously didn't help. But it was quite a different picture for me. This is actually underage soccer. But again, you know, you can get nice pictures. It doesn't have to be in an international event to get really nice pictures. I'm coming to that now.
That's what I was saying early on. You know, if you can get good sports pictures, because a good sports picture is the same whether it's the top level or, you know, college or schools. You know, if it's got all the hallmarks of a quality sports picture, it's a good picture, you know.
No, absolutely. It doesn't have to be, you know, Springboks or something like that. I mean, in fact, I'll show you. It's coming up now. The Billikies. I mean, those guys give 150% effort. I mean, I think some of the professional players can learn from the Billikies just in terms of the effort that they give in every single game. I mean, it's extraordinary, and you can see it in the pictures. This was a lucky picture. I was actually on him when he did the spectacular catch, because I don't think people realize just how, particularly when it's a fast bowler, not a medium pacer, how difficult it is to actually get the wicketkeeper catch pictures, because it's a millisecond from the time it hits the bat to the time it actually the guy's taking the catch. And then also getting a clear view of the wicketkeeper is sometimes impossible if you've got a left-hander batting and things like that, you know. So this was quite a lucky shot, but okay. Stock is a very, very big part of sports photography, okay? But it's nice to get stock like this that was actually used in AB's book, as opposed to boring stock. Because, I mean, some of the stock can be quite boring, but, you know, one must always aim to get really something a bit different in your stock pictures as well. Likewise, this one of timber. Okay, just another bold picture, and again, you know, helps that the stump comes out the ground, and helps that it's Michael Clarke, the Australian captain, who everybody hated as well. I don't know why we've got this pathological hate of the Australians instead of respecting the fact that their sports structures are so incredible. And anyway, but they don't dominate sport like they did. I mean, at one stage it was crazy. They were world champions in 5 different sports for a small country. It was extraordinary. You know, that's when we really hated them. The one and only Bob Skinstead. But it's not like I could have sold this to Energate, because it was clearly water in the bottle. But again, you know, one must always try and look for something a little bit different, because it just works.
And here's a question from Jason. He's asking, are there any issues photographing public events, permission, etc.?
Well, unless you go to an interclub swimming event, there shouldn't be. I mean, there shouldn't be issues. You know, I mean, probably it's the polite thing to do is to speak, you know, whoever, let's say club rugby, club cricket, club soccer, to maybe speak to the people at the club first before you just arrive and start shooting. But I mean, you know, they shouldn't have any issues. You know, that's okay, that's probably fairly private. I'm not sure what he means exactly by a public event, because strictly speaking, if it's, you know, even if it's a rugby club or a soccer club, it's actually then private. I'm not entirely sure what he means about
I suspect, and maybe Jason, if you want to just add to your comment, I suspect what he's referring to is maybe like a model release type thing, you know, which you would have if you wanted to use that picture or sell that picture or for stock, etc. You know, you should.
Okay, there's not a model release as such, but now what happens generally for action photography, if you want to actually sell an image for anything other than editorial purposes, there have to be at least 3 players in the picture.
Right.
If there are more than 3 players in the picture, then you don't have any kind of complications.
Okay,
you shouldn't.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's what he's referring to, because obviously there's a lot of issues of you know, getting permission. Why are you taking my picture? You know, etc. So I think thanks for clarifying that.
It's interestingly enough, I was actually meeting a lawyer the one day, because I used to do crib shoots for a magazine, and I was trying to set up with one of his players, and I was showing him the Fashini Sports Club magazine, and he saw an action picture of Stephen Pienaar, and he says, but does he get paid for this? And I said, no, it's an action picture during a game. It's an editorial use. It's not any kind of advertising. And he was actually, although he was a lawyer, he was quite taken aback that he wasn't actually going to get paid specifically for that picture. As I said, it's very different when it becomes an advertising thing or a commercial thing or semi-commercial thing. Then it's a whole different scenario. You've got to deal with the player and the agent and all the rest of it, and they've got to get a cut and all that sort of thing. Exactly. But as I say, as a fairly standard thing, so long as there are 3 players in the picture, you usually don't have complications. Okay.
Jason, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, this is Wanderers 2003 Cricket World Cup final. But at least they told us that the Boeings were going to come overhead, unlike the Rugby World Cup in 1995. I mean, I luckily did get a shot of it, but I mean, a lot of the guys, I mean, nobody knew it was happening. And the next thing, this plane went over Ellis Park, and guys were standing there with like 500mm lenses, and they just didn't get any pictures. I say, here they warned us, so it was actually quite cool. Yeah, I don't know why I like this picture so much, but I like it. It's just, as I said, there's not that much action. I think it's just Dwayne Vermeulen's face, something a bit different. Okay, this is a slightly different diving try picture in that I actually specifically shot the fans in the background as well. And, some people would probably have cropped the fans out, but I mean, the whole purpose of shooting a bit wider was to actually get the fans, even if they are out of focus, at least you get the feel of the fans in the background, just to make it a little bit different rather than another diving try picture. Because in terms of a rugby match and cricket specifically, your positioning, a lot depends on who you're shooting for. A lot of the newspaper guys, all they want is 2 try pictures from the game. They're not worried about stock. So they'll just park off behind the try line. Now, I don't do that because I've obviously got to shoot stock as well. So I just run up and down, up and down. I mean, I think some games I probably run further than the players do. But then cricket, for instance, a lot depends on who you're shooting for. If you're shooting for an on-day client, you're then going to want the stumps out the ground, et cetera, and you're not really shooting stock. So then I would always shoot down wicket because your chances of getting those pictures are much greater down wicket, and you've got a cleaner kind of background. Side on, if the Proteas are batting, for instance, and I need stock more than on-day pictures, then I'll go side on. But then I've got a bit of a phobia that I'll go higher up to get a clean background. Because to me, there's nothing worse than having a cluttered background. And with cricket, you've got bright umbrellas and things like that. And so I just tend to rather go for grass in the background, which some people think makes it look more boring, but I think it works better for stock.
Absolutely. I mean, especially if you've got, bails and wickets and balls flying all over the place, you can't, see them as well. It's, it also just loses a bit of impact, I think.
No, sure. And then, the thing is, stock is important because if somebody's writing a story about a batsman, they're not going to illustrate it with a picture of him being bowled. They want a really nice action shot of him batting. So, stock's more important than action, actually, in the long term.
Yeah.
Okay, just again, athletics. Again, if you're at a fairly low-key event, they're quite cool about your positioning and stuff. You can get into positions that you'd never be allowed to at the SA National Champs, for example. So one must take advantage of that. The athletic shot, hurdles is always nice for pictures, particularly when you've got 2 of them coming through together like this. And I mean, look at those faces.
Yeah, I mean that's sheer determination and tunnel vision in those eyes, hey?
Yeah. Again, I lay flat on the ground because this was prior to flipping screens. So I literally lay flat on the ground just to try and get a more dramatic shot. So, particularly, as I say, if you're at events where there's no restriction in terms of where you can go. I mean, obviously here that you can't go into the sand, but I mean, there's very little in terms of restrictions at a lower key athletics event. This was actually the national championships, but even there, you are allowed to go to a position like this, lying at the end of the sandpit. So, take advantage of lying low and shooting something more dramatic, because if I'd been standing, it just wouldn't look the same. Plus, that background would have spoilt the picture. This is quite fun because the French rugby team have got quite a bad reputation for gouging eyes and grabbing the guys in the nuts. And here, Freddie Michalak is doing exactly that to Schalk Burger. And Freddie Michalak later played for the Sharks, so I'm sure Schalk got his own back at some stage.
I'm sure. I always find it fascinating that, with all the cameras that are on the guys, both stills and video, that they still think that they can get away with stuff like that. I really just don't get it.
you know, they get cited afterwards, even if it's not picked up at the time. You know, they'll get cited afterwards. So it's really stupid. You know? Okay, this is just showing the conditions you've got to shoot in sometimes. I mean, I've shot games at Newlands where you literally couldn't see 20 meters in front of you because of the rain. This was actually at Loftus a couple of years ago, and I'd actually bought a 100% waterproof jacket before the game. And I thought, oh, I'll put it on after the anthem as well. During the anthems, it rained like this, and there was literally, it was golf balls of hail came down. I mean, I had hail down the front of my shirt, down the back of my shirt. So I didn't even bother to put on the 100% waterproof jacket because I was soaked. You know?
Yeah, it would have been a sauna inside of that.
It was crazy. And I'd had bronchitis. I actually got out of bed to go and shoot this. So you should have heard me barking like a dog at the end of that game. But anyway, again, you know, it was great for pictures. It wasn't great rugby, but it was really nice for pictures. Obviously shot at a slower speed here to emphasize the rain. Yeah, I normally shoot at 1,000th of a second as a minimum. But, you know, the light, I would rather shoot at 1,000th of a second than 1,600, 2,000th of a second and have to go up higher ISO, particularly when you're already on 3.2.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and yeah, I mean, I'm sure people do know, and in case they don't, that action coming towards you, you can stop at a much slower speed than action that goes across from you. If you know what I mean. In other words, an athlete running towards you, you could stop it even at 640. Whereas let's say a soccer tackle where they slide in and the action goes across from you like that, you've got to be at least 1,000th of a second, preferably 1,600.
Yeah. Okay,
basketball, I shoot a reasonable amount of basketball for the junior NBA. And if I can get into an elevated position, I always will, because it just gives you much more dramatic pictures.
That's probably the most fascinating basketball picture I've ever seen. You know, I mean,
well, I think it's the best one I've shot in terms of, you know, just being different.
Jeepers,
you know.
That's crazy.
But again, you know, if it hadn't been elevated, it would never have looked the same. You know. And again, you've got to worry with backgrounds because these are often at schools, and you've got horrible backgrounds, so you've got to try and lose your background as much as you can. This is quite an interesting one. This was during Soccer World Cup. What makes it interesting is that it's actually the goalkeeper's own defender that's actually clashing with him. But as I say, most people just looking at it straight off won't necessarily realize that. But that's what made this picture, was that it was his own player that was wiping out the goalkeeper. Okay, this is also quite interesting because this was the test match against Australia in Bloemfontein. And Michael Checker, the Australian coach, went out into the media and said, oh, it was nonsense. He didn't pull his hair. He never pulled his hair. All he did was pull his collar. And guess what, Butch?
Yeah. As I said, you know, all those cameras, stills and video, I just don't understand how they think they can get away with it.
And then Michael Checker to stand up and, you know, publicly support his player that he didn't pull the guy's hair. I mean, really? Anyway, so yeah. Okay, this is... You know, I love shooting Kaizer Chiefs and Pirates, but it's such difficult lighting because the players are already in the shadow of the field from the stadium, and you've got that incredibly bright sun behind you of the stand. So there's just nothing you can do short of doing a massive manipulation to get rid of all of that white in the background. But I don't do that, so you just got to make the best of what you can in the situation. By the way, I shoot everything on manual. I never shoot auto. Part of the problem is when you've got electronic advertising, you could lose a really crucial picture because suddenly the advert turns white or turns black in your background. So I always shoot on manual. Sorry, that's just the way I am. I mean, and if I did shoot on auto, I wouldn't shoot on AV because you can always save a picture even if it's 2 stops under, you can save it. But if you've got a speed blur because it's gone down to 2/50th of a second and you don't want a speed blur, there's nothing you can do.
There's nothing you can do.
So I don't understand why a sports photographer would shoot on AV. That's just, I know there are guys that do it and, you know, they're welcome to take me to task for saying this, but I don't understand the logic because, as I say, once you've got that speed blur you don't want, there's nothing you can do. Okay, Billicky Rugby. I mean, look at that face. Doesn't get paid a cent. Gets a cool drink after the game. And look at that effort they put in. I mean, look at these oaks.
Yeah.
And the other thing is you can shoot, you know, that's what I'm saying to people who you don't have to have fancy equipment. You can shoot with a very basic camera. I would say, yes, you do need something like 75-300. And I bought a Sigma one because I did at one stage, did a lot of work for an education books publisher. And I didn't want to go to the school ground where I wanted to get candid pictures of kids talking to each other at break times. So I specifically bought that lens, and I actually found that it was sharper at that stage. It was sharper than either the Canon or the Nikon equivalent. The Sigma was actually sharper than either of those. Not that these weren't shot with that lens, but I will show you a picture coming up now that was. But a lens like that is cheap. I mean, and as I say, you can certainly shoot club games, schools athletics. You can maybe have a bit of a problem when you go indoors with the school, a hall that's badly lit. But certainly for outdoors, you can shoot, and you don't have problems with access, accreditations, and stuff like that. So if you've got an interest in sport, or your kid is playing in a school sports team, take your camera, go and shoot pictures of your kid, because you never get that time back.
Absolutely, absolutely. Oh, that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah, look at that face. And then, this picture I shot, as I said, with the D80 and the Sigma 75-300. What happened was I'd been using a lot of kids from that school for an education book series to pose out different things that I needed. And to thank the school, I spent the day from like 8 in the morning until sort of 4:30 in the afternoon shooting this school sport, all different sports. And I gave them the pictures. But I was also shooting a Super Rugby game that night. And I just thought, boy, if I've got that heavy equipment for the entire day. So I shot it with the D80 and the Sigma 75-300. So you can get good pictures with it. And again, this is the D5-200, which is as basic as you can get. I had that as my third body at the World Cup final and got this picture. So again, you just got to shoot within the camera's limitations, but it doesn't stop you shooting really nice pictures. Okay, now I just want to show a series of slightly different pictures quickly. I'm afraid when I shoot netball and I shoot tennis, I actually get bored. Sorry, but I do. And that's when I start shooting shadows. But again, it can make nice pictures. So I'm just trying to show a few different shots. This is shooting with the 10.5, lying flat on the ground with the D500. So it's basically 16 mil. Again, it's at an event where they're allowing you to lie right next to the actual point at which they release the javelin. And it's not going to happen at every event, but take advantage if you do get into a situation like that. Again, just a bit of a different shot of John Smith. And then this was from the same Argentinian game. A lot of people hate this picture, but I think it tells the story of what the conditions were like, Some people think it's a completely arty-farty, doesn't work picture, but I think it tells the story of what those conditions were like. And here, the only thing that makes this picture are the eyes. I mean, if the helmet was down and you couldn't see those eyes, it would be a nothing picture. So always be on the lookout for something a little bit different. Again, lying flat on the tarmac to shoot this. And obviously it's helped by the fact that you've got the drama of those storm clouds in the background, but it's also the angle is what does it.
Yeah, also the javelin perfectly positioned through his head.
No, sure. Then again, something a little bit different from rugby. You must look for off the ball as well, because you get a lot of this sort of thing happening off the ball. And they're obviously hoping that the TV camera is following the ball and not following, but actually capturing them. Again, just something a little bit different. And then the one and only Pieter de Villiers, our notorious Springbok coach. I mean, he was a journo's delight because of his quotes were just unbelievable. I mean, he came up with such funny stuff. But again, it's just looking for a different angle. Again, shooting super wide makes it quite dramatic. Although it's a free advert for emperors, but it's just one of those things. Okay, then this is obviously something really different, using multiple exposure option in the camera. Obviously, there were only 2 fences in the original picture. You can't use it often, but it does make for something interesting every now and again. Okay, this is another javelin shot. This is not what the scene actually was. I underexposed by about 6 stops to get this. Otherwise, it was just quite boring. This made it a lot more dramatic. So I always try and get something a little bit different. Here, a Michi had flown into the player's eye. So I'm not sure quite why the assistant coach felt the need to actually spray him to that extent, but it made for a nice picture.
Yeah.
And again, something a little bit different. Okay, there's some photographers who think sort of panning and slow speed is a new thing. It's been around forever. Probably 50 years before I shot this picture in Cape Town 20 years ago, it was around. This is really arty-farty. I mean, I shot it like a 10th of a second here, but it's something different and it works, you know. That's what I love about swimming and athletics. You can actually shoot quite nice different stuff. Again, it's not a new technique. The only thing that's important is that something somewhere has got to be sharp, and luckily those eyes worked on this one. Again, slow speed on the swimming, which works. And then obviously, whenever you're shooting motorbikes, you don't want spokes showing up. Lousy background, but at least you get a sense of speed and things like that. So, I mean, you don't have to pan every shot, but you can use it as a technique to emphasize speed. Okay, now I'm going to get onto a few pictures on cropping. You mustn't be scared to crop. That picture works. Look how much better that one works. Okay. Same again on this one. Completely different picture once it's cropped. Okay, now I'm going to give an extreme example. This was the final test in 2009 the second test at Loftus, but the Springboks had won the first test. So if they won this, they won the series against the British and Irish Lions. And Franz Stan got the conversion from the corner. And this was as close as I could get. I mean, I was shooting with a 200-400 on the, basically with the converter then. So it was like 600 mm lens, but that was as close as I could get. So yeah, I did really drastic cropping here, which I would never really recommend. But for your on-day client, that's what they want. So don't be scared to crop, but I mean, ideally don't shoot that you've got to crop like this. It was just the situation where it was on the field at the time. Short of running onto the field, I couldn't get closer.
Yeah, that's a pretty drastic crop.
It's a drastic crop, very drastic crop. But as I say, you know, these new cameras, you can get away with it. And as I say, that's what your on-day client wants, you know. Again, this is a bit less of a crop, but again, it also makes a big difference in terms of the impact, I think. So don't be scared to crop. I mean, I try not to have to crop very much at all, but just sometimes it just makes a huge difference. A small crop can make a massive difference in terms of the impact. Okay, now I'm just going to show, I think I'm running out of time now, but I'm just going to show some pictures in terms of what sport's about. It's the celebration, it's the winning. Okay. As I said, nobody remembers you came second. Yeah, here, obviously, ideally, I wouldn't have wanted that pipe in the background, but again, you know, short of taking a hacksaw before the game, there's nothing you can do about it, you know. Yeah, Imran Tahir was always awesome for pictures because his celebrations were so over the top, it was ridiculous. I mean, the joke was that they actually had extra security at games where he was playing so that they could stop him running out of the stadium. But it was great for pictures. I mean, that's Laing Kune celebrating South Africa scoring a goal against Spain. So you've got to look out for that. Watch out for the keeper, you know, when they actually score. Dale Steyn with his mad eyes. I mean, the most chill guy off the field, but a complete maniac on the field. Alan Donald was probably one of the first South Africans that really used to celebrate. And it was awesome because, I mean, in the old days, the guys just didn't celebrate. You know, I mean, it was none of this. This was frowned upon. I mean, really.
It's just not cricket.
No, it's not cricket. Stiff upper lip and all of that. I mean, really, I mean, it was great that he broke the kind of, again, Imran Tahir. Another rugby celebration. As I say, that's what, you know, those are, okay, now I'm going to go on to some fan pictures because I think the players forget that without the fans, they wouldn't be earning the salaries that they earn. There wouldn't be the interest in the game if it wasn't for the fans. And some of the fans take the game so seriously. I mean, honestly, if Pitt ever dressed up anything like this, I'd shoot him at the front door before we went to the game. But yeah, it makes for some quite nice pictures. I'm going to go through these quickly because I know I'm pretty much out of time now. But yeah, as I say, some of these guys take their dressing up very seriously. I don't think that Oak's ever been at a Springbok game where he's been sober, but yeah. Sometimes they just take it to extremes. You know? Oh, I love Kaizer Chiefs Pirates games because you get awesome pictures of the fans. It was actually a Bafana game. It was the first time and only time that they had a Bafana game and they had a rugby test at Orlando Stadium. And they've never done it again. I'm not entirely sure why, but it was a huge success. And I can't understand why they haven't done it again. But anyway. And then classic.
My goodness me.
Bulls fan. Okay, and then to finish off, I'm going to show you, he is training for the Doggy Olympics. Okay. And so is Greer. They're training for the Doggy Olympics, and I haven't had the heart to tell them that there is no such thing. That's me. So there, that's it.
Fantastic. I'm just going to stop your sharing so that we can be next to each other. There we go. And thank you very much. That was super entertaining. I think everyone got a hell of a lot out of that. You know, I think it was quite unexpected. And I loved it. I loved the stories. I loved everything that you know, put in there. And I'm so glad that we managed to get past the technical difficulties in the beginning.
Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, 2 minutes before, everything operated fine, and then
that's the way that it works.
Sure.
So yeah, thank you very, very much. I absolutely loved it. I think it was fantastic. There's a lot of questions and comments on the Facebook feed. So once we finish here, you can go there and answer some of the questions, because there's
Sure.
been you know, some really nice comments, and I think it'd be good to go and have a look. So thank you very much.
Thanks
I really appreciate
thank you.
it. And enjoy the rest of the afternoon and the weekend.
No, thanks a lot, Tim. Thanks
Thanks, Anne.
Thanks so much, everybody. Thanks, Anne.